Okay, so the game you see before you is the Fellowship of the Ring. This is an old Iron Crown Enterprises game. Now, I picked this up used off of Undead Vikings auctions. It was obviously a very heavily played and well-loved copy. I had to perform a little bit of emergency surgery on some of the cards. They were quite ragged from shuffling, and I did a little bit of trimming on them. Hopefully they'll stand up a little better. I'm not going to do a lot of shuffling with them because obviously they deteriorate very quickly. Speaking of which, I got along with the game, I'm assuming he inserted this intentionally, I got the hand-drawn Kraken, and that made me very happy, actually. So he and other people have convinced me that I need to try to do this one. This is going to be a hard game to play solitaire. It's all about hidden movement, which is what these little, they're actually dice rather than blocks are. They're the way of hiding counters. And now let me go over briefly what we see here. This is a game I wanted when I was in my teens. And I saw it on the shelf in my game store. It was a little higher priced than all the other board games. I don't remember if it ran 20 or 25. I already had SPI's War of the Ring, which I liked a lot. And I looked at this one, and every time I looked at the back of the box, it looked like it was going to be kind of questionable visual component-wise, etc. And it turns out it is. It's certainly not as pretty a board as the SPI version. But it also looked like it was only the character game, which is true. It goes further than that. It doesn't even take the ring to Mount Doom. Your goal is only to get the ring kind of close to Mount Doom and call a victory at that point as the Fellowship player. So there's no armies on the board here. It definitely, like the pure character game for the SPI version, or game, they're completely separate, felt like it was something you couldn't play solitaire. And I still hold that opinion. I'm going to try here, but only because a couple of people really wanted to see something of it. So, for a couple of years I saw it on the shelf. It never moved. Nobody ever bought it. And if I were who I am now, I would go to the store owner and say, look, you're not moving that thing. I'll give you X for it, and see if he did. But I wasn't that kind of kid. And there was always something else to buy, or almost always. I mean, there was another one there, Flat Top, and I never got around to buying that either. So, let's see where we are. And that's, the SPI War of the Ring is the main game that I can compare this to. So then, when I got to college, a couple of years in, a friend of mine who only played role-playing games for the most part had a copy of this, and that and Dip. And he invited me to play. We played once, and it was a fantastic game. A really, really good game. And since that moment, I've kept my eye out for it. And I've seen it used a couple of times at stores. Never cheap enough. And, well, I ended up paying about the price that I keep avoiding on it. So, and not for a new copy this time. So I'm kind of kicking myself that I never bought it earlier. But I'm glad to have it now. I don't think that I'm going to be able to play very well, and I may not make this through entirely solitaire. But I'm going to give you a little feeling for what's going on. First of all, the map is kind of weird. Like Der Welterkrieg, terrain is only on the hex sides, basically. That's the only place the terrain really matters. There are these little colored markers. They indicate the kind of land it is. That's important, perhaps. Well, that's important for searches. It's also where you have different types of land. It's important, perhaps, for how the evil player or enemy player or whatever determines where he's searching. And it also affects a random activity table, which could indicate areas that you can randomly search as the evil player without having to expend, without directing them. I don't believe it affects what you face monster-wise. I think those are just affected by region, and I don't remember what a region. Oh yeah, the regions are divided up here. Okay, and there's numerical divisions to indicate the different kinds of forces you have, and for the most part, really, these aren't terribly distinguished. I mean, if you're in region 5, you're going to face animals, but it's the same pile of animals you'd face anywhere. And that's kind of the case with all of this. It's just, you know, what proportion of orcs to animals to what, to this, to that, to the other, are you liable to face as a random encounter for monsters. This map is also close to the victory point map. Let me show you. This is kind of hard to see. So in order for the Fellowship to win, they have to get, and this is really kind of hard to actually read, but they have to get beyond the F zone into the E zone. And I think it doesn't quite correspond. It comes close to corresponding with this map. But essentially it means you have to get to within one space of the gray, and I believe that's Saronic activity areas. But red is wild, so in here counts. Not that you can get there very easily. There's also some off-map areas up in the extreme north and in the ocean. And that's one thing, you're not at all forced to follow the route that the Fellowship actually took. In fact, if you were, it would ruin the whole game. Unlike the SPI game, here we really have hidden counters. And here's what I've set up. With all the evil player counters, and I'll explain them briefly in a moment, are dormant, which means they can't actually be moved. They can block terrain and have effects, however. So the Fellowship is able to start in these two spaces. And they can start, they have 5 starting hobbits. The 4 that you're familiar with, if you're at all familiar with the books, and the 5th one, Fatty Bulgar, who's kind of in the first book, but of the trilogy, but doesn't play a huge role. Well, he can play a big role in this one. He's not very valuable as a fighting character or whatever. You don't want to probably take him along on the Fellowship if you can help it. I've decided I want to. So here's the thing. I could split between these two, and I'm allowed to create dummies to fill it up so that there's 4 little markers in each space. And I've got everybody in this one space. I've got that marked, and you know, these can be kind of hidden, etc., but since I'm playing solo, by piling them up all here. And the other starting character that the Fellowship gets is Gandalf, who's fleeing Isengard. And he's fleeing on the Eagles, and he's got a dummy counter too. On turn 3, we get what Aragorn comes in to play. In turn 4, Glorfindel comes into play. And they can help if you follow something close to the original path, because Aragorn starts in Bree, or we, and Glorfindel, I believe, starts in Rivendell. Now, my thinking, the first time I played, I went a similar route to what the Fellowship actually followed. I went to Rivendell, I collected everything up, etc. This time I want to try a strike through the ocean, directly going through the Grey Havens. Now, this is tricky because there are guardians, and that's these red things, out at sea. And there are some that can only be at sea. This one, for example, has to be the Corsair ship. This is the only place it can start. It's next to the coastal island, and I don't have a dummy there. I know that's real. Krakens can start in a number of places, one of which is out in the ocean. They cannot start on the refrigerator. They can also start here in the lake outside Moria, and oh boy, is that crowded. We got the Balrog has to be in Moria. The lake is a possible feature. And then what else do I have here? I don't know what this other pass is. Yeah, there's some little pass, a road running through here. That's the Red Horn, which is where they got snowed in. Some terrain features are hard or impossible to cross. Mountains, for example, are impossible to cross. That's very much like the SPI version. I think this came out after the SPI game. And it's certainly, 83. And it certainly seems somewhat derivative. The event cards feel similar. They're not the same. They're not exactly. And it certainly doesn't have the little funny mechanism where you can discard and the other guy can draw your discard. The idea of the cards, the way the character combat's handled, a lot of that feels very similar. But it feels like they played that game and said, you know what? This does not feel at all like the books. And this game is an attempt to make the books, or come more to life in a game. It doesn't worry about the armies because honestly the people in the books weren't commanding the armies. I mean, some of them were, but the story was never from the army's perspective until the breaking of the Fellowship. So this game covers until the breaking of the Fellowship in concept. Anyway, it's risky to go down through the water view, I think. I was afraid to do it last time, but I'm going to chance it this time. One, if it makes for a short game, that makes the misery less on me for trying to play a double-blind game solitaire. But also, I really do want to give that a little play and see how it works. I'm not really familiar with the rules, so this is going to be a hard slog for me. I've read through them once, and I've kind of skimmed them again since to get the setup and to figure out how I want it to do the setup. Okay, let's go to the evil player counters and explain what they are. The black ones, well, at this point, those are only Nazgul. There are 3 of these 6 sets that I've set up, or 5 sets, that are really Nazgul. And then there are 2 dummies. But they're all dormant. I get 3 activations on the first turn with the evil player. And that would allow me to activate all my Nazgul, or maybe do something else. The red ones are Guardians. Those, I believe, are a little... They represent the same kind of characters that are in the SPI game. That are sort of uncontrolled monsters, things like the Balrog. They can be very, very potent. In this case, they are controlled by the evil player, however. Whether or not he wants to activate them depends on the routes. A lot of them are being spent blocking roadways. They're doing a fine job without being activated. If some of them are dummies, such as life. One thing I know is that this is the Fire Drake. because he's the only thing in that location. And the Grey Mountains is the only place the Fire Drake can start. That also tells me that the Cold Drake is, I believe, one of these two. So there's all these little bits of information you can kind of deduce from the starting setup, because the evil player he has a lot of things to cover, a lot of ground to cover, and giving away some information isn't that terrible, if that's the case. Now, given that there's only one Drake up here, it might have been more interesting to head up this way. I'm not sure. That involves some pain, though, either trying to slip down through here, which doesn't look terribly hard, or going up into the Forodway, which, without Gandalf, would cause damage to the characters, and that would be very bad. I'm not absolutely positive that I want to run for the sea, but I do want to give that a shot. I definitely don't want to do sort of the straight-out book version. And once I start crossing to here and get to Rivendell, the then what question becomes very much harder to resolve. It might be answered by my cards. In fact, I might change my strategy based on the cards I get. You start the game with a hand of 3 event cards. There's 1/3 set of counters, which is the Saruman ones. He starts out inactive and not on the board. And of course he's white because he's Saruman the White. The Saruman player is kind of interesting in this. He's not an extra player. There's no option for that like in the SPI version. However, he's also not entirely under the evil player's control. If he grabs the ring, he runs back to Isengard, and if he holds on to it long enough, both sides lose. He becomes the new Dark Lord. This is different from how the SPI version handles Saruman. In the SPI version, Saruman is either your little pawn as the evil player, or he's a full-fledged player on his own and actually kind of opposed to you. The power of Saruman's units and the addition of that whole extra set is what keeps me from wanting to go through the Gap of Rohan. And in the book, or the historical treatise, that's why they avoided that area, because it was too worrisome. What happens if all of Saruman's orcs are looking for you as well? So, I'm not going to start tonight. It's rather late. But I think I'm mostly set up. I think I'm ready to go. And I'm hoping this is going to be kind of enjoyable. I'm going to have to make a lot of die roll attempts at trying to make decisions. I don't really like doing that much. I have a lot of games that don't require that. But I do want to get this under my belt at least once solitaire before I convince somebody to play it with me, because I'm just not comfortable enough with the rules as it stands. So it should be cool. Let me think what else there is. Yeah, I think I've covered almost everything. The rulebook itself is actually kind of nice. I know that I'm saying I had trouble absorbing, but it was easy to read. I feel like I have a pretty good idea. I'm going to have to look things up because some of the mechanisms are very different. But it looks easy to refer to and easy to find things, as well as a nice, pleasant read. So I give it pluses there in a way that too many modern games have just failed completely. I don't know why we knew how to write rules back in 1983 or 75 or, well, the gamers still do. But we can't seem to get it right in so many modern systems. And it's not just GMT. All right, I'm going to send this one up to you.